Welcome. We're coming to you live from the Results Operations Center here in Midrand at Galaga Estate, and it's happening. Votes are coming in thick and fast. Almost 4,358 of the 23,293 voting districts have been completed. That's about 18.71% of all the voting districts of the plus 24,000 voting districts have now been counted. The projections by many analysts set the ANC at 42.3% on the national ballot. This would be a negative of 15.2% from the previous elections. The DA 21.8%. Which would be an increase of a percent from the previous elections. And the new kids on the block, the MK, who are making waves, they're projected to be at around 13.6%, and the EFF at 9% which would be a negative of a 0.18%. The IFP, they're projected to be at 3.5%, which is plus 0.1%, and the Patriotic Alliance 2.2%. That's their projection. But projections and actual numbers, that are coming in here at the ROC are not correlating as much as we thought that they would. They are close, but they are not correlating as much as we thought that they would. The ANC right now sitting at 42.92% nationally. The DA coming second at 25.1% nationally. The EFF 8.68% nationally, and the MK at 8.1%. So we're going to try to make a sense of all of this and what all of these numbers are telling us. They are coming in so quick that you might expect that we might have results coming in a few days. We'll be speaking to Ashraf Patel in a few minutes. He's joining us via StreamYard. We're still trying to get hold of him so that he can give us insight on what we can make of these numbers. If you can give me just an opportunity to repeat them. We're currently sitting at a completion of 8.71%. This is 4,358% of the 23,293 voting districts that have been completed. And so far, looking at those numbers, the ANC sitting at 42.92%, the DA sitting at 25.1%, the EFF at 8.68%, MK, Umkhonto, at 8.18%, the Patriotic Alliance at 4.23%, the IFP at 1.95%, for the Freedom Fund Plus 1.9%, Action SA 0.79%, the ACDP 0.62%, the UDM at 0.51%, and then you have the CCC, another new entrance, making waves at 0.5%. But then what's really interesting when you look at those numbers, and I think my colleague can just put up the big screen there that we are seeing, which is coming live from the Results Operations Center. I think if you can just look at the provinces themselves, starting with what many call a shock, of the century, or not, maybe, if you're a supporter of the MK, is at around 7.22% of completion of the voting districts, which is about 3.59% of the 4,974 voting districts in the KZN. The MK is leading with a support base of 42.71%. That equates to about 58,278 of votes. And then the ANC coming in second with about 21.43%. This would equate to 29,238 votes. And then the IFP coming in third in the KZN with about 15.12% of the votes. That would equate to about 20,628%. So out of 359%, that's currently where we stand. You have the DA also coming in fourth in the KZN with 8,427,000 counted votes. That equates to around 13.5% of the vote. The EFF coming in fourth in the KZN with 2.45%, which is 3,348 of the votes. The NFP, which really used to enjoy a significant support in the KZN, is languishing at 0.96%. That would equate to 1,308 of votes. The Freedom Front Plus, 0.41% of the votes, which is 563 votes. ACDP, 563 votes, equal to the Freedom Front Plus in the KZN. That equates to 0.41% of the votes. Action SA, 434% of the vote, which is about 0.32%. The Patriotic Alliance, another newcomer, at 332% of the votes, equating to 0.24%. And then we have APEMO at 215 votes, which equates to 0.16%. So that was KZN. Those are what the numbers are currently telling us. Before we get Ashraf, I want us to maybe just look at Gauteng, the nation's richest province there. They are currently at 12.16% completion. So around 340 of the 279 of the 2,797 voting districts, rather, have been completed. So 340 of the 2,797 voting districts completed. And then the leading party there, well, this one is going to be really, really close. And I think, if this trend continues here in Gauteng, we might have a situation where the province of Gauteng is led by a coalition government, because the ANC is currently sitting at 34.38% of the votes in Gauteng, which equates to 105,136 votes. The Democratic Alliance coming in second at 29.27% of the votes, and the EFF coming in third at 11.54% of the votes. You have the MK coming in fourth. Again, the MK, for a new entrance, doing really, really well in Gauteng with 9.47% of the votes. This would equate to 28,950 people in Gauteng voting for the MK. The Freedom Front Plus currently sitting at 10,554,000 votes. This is 3.45%. Action SA, 9,875 votes. That would equate to 3.23% of the votes. Patriotic Alliance, Keaton McKenzie's party in Gauteng, they're sitting at 1.67% of the votes, which equates to 5,095 votes. And then the IFP at 1.02%, which equates to 3,107 votes. The ACDP, 2,660 votes. That equates to 0.87%. And then you have another new entrant to these elections, which is Rise Mzansi. They're currently sitting at 2,650 votes. That equates to 0.87% of the votes. And then lastly, it's Al Jamar. They are sitting at 0.72%. That would equate to 2,196% of the votes. So this is Gauteng. But I think what's overarching, what's going to be very, very important is that figure of 34.38% of the votes being garnered by the ANC. The DA coming in second at 29.27% of the votes. The EFF coming in third at 11.54% of the votes. I think Gauteng is going to be very, very interesting because if the trend continues, we might see a coalition government. Before I let you go, we're going to take a quick look at the Western Cape, another hotly contested province. They are currently sitting at 23.22% of completion, not of the votes, but of the voting districts that have been completed. So that equates to about 365 of the 1,572% of voting districts having been counted. And the leaders there, no surprise at all, almost half of the Western Cape voting for the Democratic Alliance so far. These are not the final results, but almost half of the votes so far belonging to the Democratic Alliance in the Western Cape. They're sitting with 49.175% of the votes in the Western Cape. The ANC, they're at 20.08% of the votes. And the Patriotic Alliance, they seem to be making headway in the Western Cape with about 12.30% of the votes. And then fourth, you have the EFF in the Western Cape at 4.12% of the votes. The CCC at 3.05% of the votes currently. And Al Jama coming in fifth in the Western Cape with 1.63% of the votes. That would equate to around 4,731 of the people in the Western Cape having voted for Al Jama. Freedom Front Plus in the Western Cape, they're sitting at 4,484%. That would equate to around 1.54% of the votes. Good. Patricia DeLille, they are sitting at 1.36% of the votes. We seem to have Ashraf back with us, who's going to be assisting us make sense of all of this. Ashraf, thank you so much for joining us. The votes are coming in thick and fast. We are seeing trends emerging. Some surprises are coming out, especially out of the KZN. What can we make of these initial, results that are coming in on the national ballot?
Good afternoon, Selaelo. Yes, thank you for the opportunity. Look, there are some surprises, but not big surprises. In terms of analysis, I think the big story of this 2024 election essentially is the unraveling of the non-racial social compact. And what I mean by that is essentially for 30 years, by and large, the ANC has been the foundation or bastion of non-racialism, meaning that it has encouraged and included all kinds of racial groups and classes, social classes in its ranks. And that enabled it to be in power for 30 years. But we have only 20% of the votes counted. If some of the trends or statisticians are predicting it may dip below 50%, although a lot of the inland provinces' votes are still being counted, and that is the kind of base of the ANC. So it should be able to do better than what the current trends are saying. But if it dips below 50%, which some of the statisticians are predicting, then yes, what it is a clear blow or erosion of the non-racial social compact.
And speaking of the ANC, does it almost feel like the national parliamentary majority is gone? And if that's the case, I know it might be early days so far, but what can we look forward to? Are we finally at a stage where we can say probably South Africa might go into a national coalition government? And what can we make of that? What would that, in actual fact, looking at these preliminary results that are trickling in?
Yes, it is complicated. In fact, ex-President Thabo Mbeki just a few days ago raised serious concerns about the number of political parties contesting elections, and for good reason. His view was that it confuses the voters. A lot of the many parties that have mushroomed over the weeks and months have not done well in the election, except for the MK. What does that tell us? That tells us that the election has become a very much like a free market supermarket with different
mm,
investors backing different horses. I mean, if you just look at the non-performance of Rise Mzansi, which has had over 100 million rand of donor funding, private donor funding, it has actually made an impact so far on the database of the IEC. So what does that tell you? That it is almost becoming a lottery, and I think that is the other big story of the election, the electoral supermarket that has confused a lot of voters, and one needs to
mm,
review
mm,
that in the coming years, whether it's Parliament or the IEC, because it's a sheer logistical challenge to manage so many different parties. But this is
mm,
a serious wake up call for the ANC and its alliance partners. And I think sometimes we forget that the alliance partners must take responsibility, equal responsibility for the performance. They have been part and parcel of the system for 30 years. They have benefited
mm,
enormously over the years. So it's a collective responsibility of the entire ANC and the alliance partners. This result is their result, not just the ANC, not just
mm.
the president, but the entire alliance structures need to do some serious critical self reflection on where they have gone wrong.
Mm. I want us now to focus a bit on the Democratic Alliance. They are the nation's official opposition. Now, in what, about 19.12% completion of voting districts, they are sitting second at 24.52%. What do we make of their growth? Is it something that's been expected? Just looking at how they've been running their campaigns, that burning of the flag issue that grappled the whole of South Africa, and also the issue of Palestine, which came out very, very strong in this year's elections, and how parties were reacting to the genocide that was happening in Palestine. How has all of these factors contributed to what thus far we can call the stagnation of the Democratic Alliance?
Yes, I think in the last election they were on 19%. Currently they're on 23. But remember, only 20% has been counted. I think as
Mm,
the kind of inland provinces results come through, there'll be a slightly different picture emerging, but they will always be around that 20% mark. And that is their core base being currently white voters or privileged voters. But also, yes, they have made inroads into other race groups across the board. Yes, all parties have done that.
mm,
So it's not a surprise that, remember, we've had a big turnout, a large turnout, 67%. So that changes a lot of things. And, statisticians say that the higher the turnout, the more kind of change that you can expect. So that is another trend. But
mm,
remember, the big disruptor is the MK party, and the MK party has eaten at least 10% of the traditional ANC vote. So technically, if you took the MK party out of the equation, the ANC would be sitting now on 54%, 53%, which is what was originally predicted. But with the MK party is a disruptor, which so you can say between 10 and 12% of the ANC's core base has moved over to the MK, and that will dip the ANC below 50, and that's a very simple calculation.
mm,
So it's how they manage
mm,
their negotiations internally within the umbrella, which is both EFF and MK, are originally offshoots of the original ANC. That is one part of where negotiations or coalitions may be taking place. On the other side of the debate is the DA with the Moonshot coalition, and that is also stagnating because the Moonshot partners have not done so well, especially IFP and Action SA have also not done well. So it's an interesting dynamic, and this brings to bear what political policy analysts call the nightmare of coalitions. Can become very complex, very complicated, a lot of horse trading, a lot of time wasting, and for a country with such deep inequalities and service delivery challenges, I can tell you that's a nightmare for anyone negotiating all these things. So South Africa is, we may celebrate multi-party democracy, but again, it comes with a number of many challenges which we ill-equipped to deal with at this point in time.
Let's focus a bit now on the economic freedom fighters. They are sitting at an 8.73 percent. That would equate to around 175,650 votes. What do we make of their campaign, and also how it's kind of now reflecting on where they are currently when it comes to the votes?
Yes, look, they, I would say, are also uh, like the ANC. Okay, ANC's decline because of MK, but EFF and DA, one can say, stagnating, hovering around the 9%, DA around 20%. So it's not unsurprising. The new parties, particularly MK and PA, have taken chunks out of the leading parties. So that's the other trend. EFF depend. One can also say to some extent, how similar are they to the MK? That is an interesting question. Some of the analysts are saying they fall under the same umbrella. They have the same gripes and grievances of the ANC. They believe that the current ANC has become too kind of friendly towards the markets, towards entrenched interests, and have neglected kind of rural population, black professionals or working class people, rural, semi rural. So, all those gaps they have filled in. So the MK and EFF could be considered under one kind of uh, umbrella, and that would be interesting how they would engage between themselves and with the ANC. It's may also stagnate. And then there is the possibility of a grand coalition, which is far fetched, but not out of the universe. And that could be the ANC DA coalition. But that would be much, much more complicated than any of the other options on the table.
And just generally looking at voter turnout, you did touch on it a bit, and how it has impacted this year's elections. Why do you think in these elections, particularly, because for the longest of times we've always accused South Africans of being very apolitical. There was a lot of voter apathy. People not being interested. But in this year's election, it seemed even the IEC was overwhelmed by the number of South Africans that came out to cast their votes. What what switch do you think went on in South Africans' minds that instructed this decision to be part of this democratic process after seemingly not caring that much?
Yes, this was the big story of the election, the high turnout, because the stakes are so high. You must remember, we in a global situation of high inflation, we in a local situation of low socioeconomic outcomes, high unemployment, high inequality, and I think the big elephant in the room has been load shedding and the negative impact on the economy over 18 months, the ANC has only managed to fix it right at the end in the last 2 months. So that, in my view, has driven the bulk, those factors have driven the bulk of the population to try and make a change through the polls. It also has indicated that large chunks of the South African population are not quite happy with the center. Now, the center, as we define it in terms of how political analysts view it, is a kind of social democratic center. That is, everyone says the center must hold. What is the center? The center has always been the ANC for 30 years. That center is shrinking and unraveling because of global pressures,
mm,
because of globalization, the inability of nation states to really take sovereign policy decisions in favor of the populace. So the big issue for MK and ANC is there has been literally no land reform or land restitution in the last
mm,
5 years. Black professionals have complained within the corporate sector. Many of the youth coming out of TVET colleges or universities are complaining about the lack of industry to absorb them. So all these different groups have got grievances, and let's say amongst the white population, it's crime and non-delivery, blah blah, etc. So all of these different groups, if you look at the Patriotic Alliance, they about the colored community feeling marginalized in South African society. So all these different groups have
mm.
grievances, and all these grievances have come out, and this probably represents a high voter turnout, as we've seen in this election.
Mm, mm. I want us to touch a bit on, the maturity of South Africa's democracy. It's been 30 years. We seem to be having a transition in how, we're going to be, living our day-to-day lives within this system of democracy because of, this multi-party kind of interactions that we'll be having going forward, whether it's in national parliament or it's in the different provincial legislatures. Is South Africa's democracy mature enough to be led by a multi-party dispensation? Are we there yet? I'm asking this question because if you look at some of our metros, I think this is where we got a bit of a taste of what coalitions look like and taste like in a literal sense. And it hasn't worked out that well. If you look at what's happening in Tshwane, Ekurhuleni, Johannesburg, for instance, is where it's chop and changes. It's a vote of no confidence, and ultimately service delivery. It's no longer a priority because of internal squabbles in the legislature nationally. If looking at the trends, it does come to a point where the ANC has to look for friends. It has to look, for different political parties who can help, achieve that 50+1 for them to stay in power. Are we going to see that transition being seamless and our political parties working for the greater good of South Africa and South Africans?
Good question. The question is, the answer is no. At a national level, there is no mechanism to manage coalitions. And according to the Constitution, a new government must be formed after 14 days after elections. So we in a very interesting, chaotic 2 weeks ahead, depending on the final outcome that will be announced, probably certified tomorrow morning by the IEC. Once the election is certified and the final results tallied and known, that's when each political party, and the ANC in particular, and the five parties that follow, would be engaged in horse trading, and that is where it gets very interesting. But The coalitions are generally unstable, and frankly, leading three or four political parties are vastly different in terms of ideology and philosophy. So, the ANC is a national liberation movement, some elements of social democracy. The DA is very much the old party of the National Party and the Liberal Party, and it has to entrench those vested interests. The EFF and MK are populists to a large extent. So the ANC's choices would be limited to those two. There might be even be what I would call a wild card coalition that could comprise of the ANC and the IFP. Now that could be a very interesting dynamic and a possibility if the IFP has enough votes, at least 7 to 8% of the national vote or more. The ANC IFP could emerge as a potential saver for the ANC, or they may just go only with the EFF, which is what some of the unions are pushing for within the alliance. Or they may even consider the grand coalition with the DA, which is highly unlikely, but not out of the universe, as I said. And there, some of the elites in the ANC may be more favorable towards that more neoliberal alliance, but that may not hold because of the sheer pressure and grievances from below, from the masses. So we're not sure where it will go, but it is interesting times. Or the final result may just see the ANC pip over 50%, which is still possible because a lot of the kind of inland provinces votes will come in only late afternoon. So it's still early days, but interesting patterns that have emerged.
And just lastly, a parting shot. We are at 19.33% of completion of the voting districts. That's about 4,502 of the 23,293,000 voting districts that are participating in this year's election, that are, sending out ballots to be counted. What can we make of this? I know it's still early days, but I'm sure there's a picture being drawn here, and you are noticing something on your side. Just lastly, before I let you go.
Yes, I think above all, this every analyst have predicted this is a milestone, groundbreaking election, and the early patterns have definitely proved that. It is a serious wake-up call for the African National Congress and the alliance partners that should take collective responsibility for the result. Uh, they have not fulfilled the mandate of the founding fathers of the ANC, which is a broad-based, non-racial movement that captures the center, that captures the hearts and minds of the people. That was always the strength of the ANC from its early days, through the exile days, through the struggle, and through democracy. So this administration, and remember, it's not just this administration, it's also the last two administrations in particular, the Zuma years and the Ramaphosa years, both have collectively weakened the ANC in different ways, to the point where today it is dipping slightly below 50%. So that is the big story, and time for humility from the ANC and its alliance partners, and time for critical self-reflection.
No, thank you so much, Ashraf. I think we're going to leave it there. Really, really appreciate your insights. I know as time goes on and as those votes, still continue to trickle in, I will be linking up with you here at the Results Operations Center so that you can give us further insights. But I'm going to let you go for now.
Thank you, sir. Enjoy.
There you go. Yeah, really, really interesting times, really, really interesting stats and numbers that are coming in. But the projections still stand for the national ballot. The ANC projected to finish at 42.3%. This would mean outright parliamentary majority would be done. This would be negative 15.2% from the previous elections. The DA projected to be at 21.8% rather, and MK, which are seemingly becoming the key driving force of these elections. They are becoming the key story. They are projected to finish at 13.6%, and the EFF coming in fourth. And I think this, won't go down with a lot of, the supporters of the economic freedom fighters, when for the longest time, I think since their inception in South African politics, they've always been the third party. They've always been the ones that were coming behind the DA and the ANC, who were first. But it seems with these elections, they're losing ground, because a lot of people, and I'm sure you there at home, expecting that probably the EFF would maybe outrank the DA in this year's elections. But the projections see them at number 4, and finishing at 9%. The IFP fifth. These are projections. These are not the final results. The IFP projected to finish at 3.5%, and the Patriotic Alliance at 2.2%. We're going to be here at the Results Operations Center, keeping a close eye on those results as they trickle in. Just tune in to Salam Media on our various social media pages, on our YouTube, on our Instagram, Facebook, and you'll be getting the latest coming out of the Results Operations Center here at Galaga Convention Center in Midrand. We're going to leave it here for now, but we'll catch up with you soon. Goodbye.